In this video, we're going to take a look at some of those formulas that convert temperatures between Celsius and Fahrenheit. And these two questions I've selected came off of the MyMathLab Quiz 5. So if you took Quiz 5 on MyMathLab already, you saw these problems, but they had different numbers. But the processes I'm going to show you and the steps I'm going to show work the same no matter what numbers they gave you. Now, the numbers they gave us were awful, y'all. Like, this was in the fraction section on day 5, and they gave us some yucky fractions to work with. And since it's in the fraction section, we can't just convert them to decimals where we feel more comfortable. We have to use the fractions they gave us, and we have to enter our answer as fractions. So it's going to seem weird, but just bear with me. Luckily, your calculator should have a fraction button, and it should be able to change decimals to fractions. So let's look at this first question. Okay, so let's take a look at this first question. It says to convert a temperature, capital F, in degrees Fahrenheit to an equivalent temperature, capital C, in degrees Celsius, use the formula below. Find the Celsius temperature. So we're being asked to find the Celsius temperature. We're finding C. That's equivalent to the temperature 87 4/5 degrees Fahrenheit. So luckily they gave us a degrees Fahrenheit. So all we need to do is evaluate this formula by replacing the capital F with this yucky mixed number. So let's go ahead and do that. So I can calculate what C equals if I just follow this rule, and I know the degrees Fahrenheit, which we do. So if I do 5/9 times 87 4/5 minus 32, I'll get the degrees Celsius. Now again, resist the temptation to change this yucky fraction into a decimal. It's actually a really pretty decimal. It's 87.8 degrees. And if this was a practice test on Blackboard, or if this was your final exam, you could totally do that. As long as when you convert to a decimal, it's a terminating decimal, like you don't have to do any rounding. You can use decimal forms, but in this section of MyMathLab, the fraction section, you have to leave it as a fraction. So resist that temptation. Just use the fraction button on your calculator to work inside the parentheses first. So I'm going to type 87 fraction button 4 fraction button 5. I'm going to enter that mixed number, then minus 32, and I get 279/5. So it gave me an improper fraction. Your calculator might give you a mixed number. You can use either one as long as it's in fraction form. And all of that still needs to be multiplied by 5/9. So again, to do that multiplication, I'm going to enter 5/9 in my calculator using my fraction button. Then I'm going to multiply to this 279/5 that I'm going to enter into my calculator using my fraction button. And when I do that, my calculator gives me what? It gave me a whole number. I got 31. So that would be degrees Celsius. So man, on this one, we could have just done decimals, right? Like, let's look at that. If I rewrote my formula, and instead of using that mixed number that I plugged in, if I replace that mixed number with the 87.8, and then I went ahead and subtracted 32 from that, that would get me 55.8. And then if I multiply by the fraction 5/9. Oh, and just heads up, if you tried to change 5/9 to a decimal, if you did 5 divided by 9 in your calculator, or you used your button that changes fractions to decimals, now for that one, you would get 0.55555555555 forever, right? So you would have to do some rounding there, and that's not allowed. If you try to change a fraction to a decimal and it requires you to round the decimal, then that one you can't use the decimal format. But you know, when I did 87 4/5 in my calculator, or if I do 4 divided by 5 in my calculator, I get a nice pretty terminating decimal, just 0.8, and that's it. That's allowed. Okay, but if I type 5/9 in my calculator using my fraction button, so I use my fraction button and then I multiply it by that decimal, it gives me a whole number. It gives me 31. So we could have, at least modified the mixed number to be a decimal, but we could not have changed the 5/9 to be a decimal because we would have had to round. So that 5/9 we had to use the fraction form, but we could have gotten away with changing the mixed number there into a decimal. Okay, now let's look at this other type of question. This again came from the quiz, the day 5 quiz on my math lab. But in this question, they give us a formula that converts between Celsius and Fahrenheit that looks a little different, but it's equivalent. It's just in a different form. The order of operations will be a little bit different for it. But this time, we're being asked to find the degrees Celsius. We're being asked to find capital C when we're given a degrees Fahrenheit. So when I plug in that degrees Fahrenheit, that 39 1/5, then I'm going to have to solve the equation to find C. We're going to have to do order of operations backwards, right? Reverse everything that happened to C to solve that. And again, 39 1/5, that is a really pretty decimal number. That's 39.2. So on a quiz or your final exam, you could change that to a decimal amount. And also 9/5 is also a pretty decimal number. If you do 9 divided by 5 on your calculator or use your fraction button, that's going to turn into 1.8. And you could solve this equation using decimals, and it's probably a little bit more user-friendly that way. It's a little less scary without the fractions, but I'm going to solve it the way it was given, just in case our final answer turns out to be a fraction. So let me go ahead and work with these fractions, especially since I get to use my calculator, right, to do all the fraction stuff. So it's really not that bad. But just a quick reminder, when you're solving an equation, you need to locate the variable you're trying to solve for, and then you ask yourself, what happened to that variable? So according to PEMDAS, what's happening to C? Okay, well, when I look over here, the first thing that happens to C according to PEMDAS is it gets multiplied by the fraction 9/5. And then once we get that product, we add 32 to that. So then we add 32. So if we want to solve for C, we need to undo all that. We need to reverse all that. And we go in the opposite order. So if the last thing that happened was that we added 32, I need to undo that. And we undo addition by subtracting. So the first thing I need to do to solve is to subtract 32 on both sides of my equation. So I'm going to draw a line to separate the left side of my equation from the right side. And I'll subtract 32 on both sides of my equation. Okay, so again, I'm going to use the fraction button on my calculator, and I'm just going to type in 39 fraction button 1 fraction button 5, or however you enter fractions into your calculator, and then subtraction button 32, and let's see what we get. Okay, my calculator gave me an improper fraction. It said 36/5. But it might have also given you a mixed number. You could have gotten 7 1/5. As long as you're keeping it in fraction form in this fraction section, you're good. Okay, so then on my other side, I have 9/5 C, and then technically plus 0, 30. If I'm adding 32 and I subtract 32 off, they vaporize to 0, but I don't have to write that. It could confuse me later, so I'm just going to have the plus 0 there. Okay, and now I need to get rid of multiplying by 9/5. So to undo that, you're going to divide by 9/5. I'm going to divide the left-hand side by 9/5, and I'm going to divide the right-hand side by 9/5. So if I have the number 9/5 divided by itself, 9/5 divided by 9/5 is just 1. So I'm going to end up with 1 C on that side. But that 1 in front of the variable is just implied. If I just write a C there, it's implied that there's 1 C. So that I don't need to write that 1 coefficient. And then on my calculator, I'm just going to enter 36/5 using my fraction button, divide by 9/5 using my fraction button. So let's go ahead and do that and type that in our calculator. Now, if you know how to do it by hand, you could do the keep, change, flip. You could multiply by the reciprocal if you wanted to. That's totally great, but you don't have to do that. You're allowed to use your calculator. So you can just type in 36/5 divided by 9/5, and let's see what our calculator gives us. What? We got a whole number again? We got 4. So 4 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we're claiming that 39 1/5 degrees Fahrenheit cashes in, or is equivalent to 4 degrees Celsius. Now, let's go ahead and solve that real quick with the decimals, because you probably, since we ended up getting a whole number anyway, right? Or you could use decimals, and then if you get a decimal for your final answer, just convert it back to fractions using your, using that button on your calculator that converts between fractions and decimals. So let's go ahead and try this again. It's a little less intimidating when you convert everything to decimals. So again, 1 out of 5. If I do 1 divided by 5 on my calculator, I get 0.2. So if I wanted to convert 39 1/5 to a decimal, that's going to be 39.2. And then 9/5, if I do 9 divided by 5 on my calculator, that gave me 1.8. Okay, so convert those fractions into decimals. They were nice, pretty terminating decimals. I didn't have to do any rounding, so it's totally legal to do that. And now I'll just follow those exact same steps. You're still going to ask yourself what happened to C and then undo it. But in this case, what's happening to C, I'm going to multiply. Okay, here we go. I'm going to multiply by 1.8 first. I multiplied first, and then I added 32 afterwards. So I'm still just going to reverse that by subtracting 32 from both sides first. But see how much nicer that is and how much easier that is to type in the calculator. I'll get 37.2 there equals 1.8c, and then I'll divide both sides by 1.8 to reverse the multiplying. So it just is a little more user-friendly. Our brains usually like this a little bit better. Again, 1.8 divided by itself is just 1, so I'm left with 1c there. And it's a lot easier to type 37.2 divided by 1.8 into our calculator. Oh, except I messed up somewhere. Where did I mess up? Subtracted 32 on both sides. Okay. I'm not getting the same answer. Oh, guys, it's not 37.2 when I subtract those numbers. It's 7.2. Okay, because I was like, it should be the same answer either way. 7.2 divided by 1.8. Okay, that's 4. That's better. It matches. Okay, cool. And if I had gotten a decimals for that final answer, I could use that button on my calculator that changes fractions to decimals, or it might be an S to D on your calculator. Okay, cool beans. So deep breaths with the fractions. Just embrace your calculator. And email me if you have any follow-up questions. I'm happy to help. You can also get help from our amazing instructional associates, or you can get free tutoring at the Learning Lab. There's more information about all those tutoring opportunities in the announcements. Just scroll down the announcements list and you'll find some links and some more information.